segment, Sweeping the Nation, Best Bets with the Puma, where he will help you win some cold, hard cash. Yes.
Cold, hard
the
cash.
Resident degenerate of the podcast is going to help you become a degenerate as well.
It's going to be great. We're going to be cashing some tickets. Did okay last week. Now, again, this segment of the podcast is brought to you by the unofficial official sports book of the Pro Football Radio podcast, and that is DraftKings Sportsbook. Not only is it available in like a bazillion states right now, just kidding, I wish, but in reality, in the great state of Connecticut, it will be going live for retail betting and in-app betting on October 7th, and I can't wait. I will not miss my trips. I will not miss my trips over the Tappan Zee Bridge to New Jersey to get my bets in. But let's get this show on the road. Off the top, Las Vegas Raiders against the Miami Dolphins, the inept Miami Dolphins, which, again, I have a missing persons report out for the offensive line of the Dolphins. They are laying 3.5 at home in Vegas. I'm taking the Raiders to cover that 3.5. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Right now, the game is actually off of the board at DraftKings. Earlier today, when I looked this morning, the Bengals were 4.5-point dogs, but really the game came off the board when reports came out that Ben Roethlisberger was dinged up with a pec issue, and then T.J. Watt, he has like a groin issue. He missed the majority of the game last week against the Raiders. Deonte Johnson has a knee issue, which was kind of a stupid thing. Not on him, just because it happened on the last play. You're down 9 points. Even if you get a touchdown in a 2-point conversion, you're still going to end up losing that football game. So an unnecessary injury for Deonte Johnson. Joey Burrows, also known as Joey Covers. I'm not really going to put a whole lot of stock into the two-back interceptions that he had last week against the Chicago Bears. I think the Cincinnati Bengals defense is another defense that has been surprising people. I like Cincinnati catching 4.5 points right now. The Saints off the top, I like them catching 3 points in Foxborough, and I think they can also win outright that game. Washington football team, I have them catching 8.5 points. I like them to cover that game. Again, I think they're going to lose against Buffalo, but I think they're going to cover the 8.5. And then the Minnesota Vikings, they are a 1-point dog. I don't know why I'm spacing this matchup right now. They're playing the Seattle Seahawks. Actually, it moved. They are now 2-point underdogs at home against the Seattle Seahawks. I like Minnesota getting 2 points at home. We can all say what we want about Kirk Cousins or Kirby Cousins, depending on what game he has. But I mean, through 2 games, he's looked really good. He's looked serviceable, and even from a fantasy perspective, Burge, maybe you have some thoughts on this too. He's been a serviceable quarterback if you're one of those guys like myself that's been streaming a lot. I like Minnesota getting the points at home. I also kind of lean to the under. I think 55 is a little bit rich for my blood right now. So if I had to bet the game, I would kind of take the under. It's actually 55.5 right now. So those are my best bets. Vegas laying 3.5. Cincinnati catching 4.5 against the Steelers. New Orleans catching 3 in New England. Washington football team catching 8.5 on the road. In Minnesota catching 2 points against the Seattle Seahawks.
Boom! Vegas ain't got none on the Puma.
We're all about Puma, cashing them checks.
Degenerate Puma coming to you from Las Vegas Light, Shelton, Connecticut.
Oh yeah, of course. It's gonna be Club Med when I can bet in the house.
Hey Puma, what's your which game you taking to the bank this week?
My take it to the bank. I gotta go with the Raiders. They're my take it to the bank. They're gonna cover that 3.5.
Yeah, well, Puma, I do. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say my take it to the bank this week is Washington football team covering the 8 points.
Okay.
Now, Puma, I actually do listen to you when you talk. I take your advice, and you have been beating this drum that the Kansas City Chiefs do not cover. And lo and behold, they play one of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL this week, the Los Angeles Chargers, with Justin Herbert. That's 6.5. That's what I'm seeing here. I don't know if that line has moved or not, but I'm going to take the Los Angeles Chargers on 6.5, man.
Yep,
I like it.
6.5. I like them covering too. So, to recap, we have the Washington football team as the first leg of our Take It to the Bank parlay, catching 8.5. You got the Raiders laying 3.5 for myself, and then you have Jay with his boy Justin Herbert catching 6.5 points on the road in Arrowhead. Now, Jay, can you imagine? I'll post this to the room, and then I swear we'll go to Fantasy Bullets with Burg. What do you think life would be like as a Kansas City Chiefs fan if they lose 2 games in a row, especially at home?
Yeah, listen, I wish it would happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But listen, all these dynasties, all these great offensive, powerhouse teams, they occasionally do get complacent. And I do think this could be one of those times where the Kansas City Chiefs could lose back-to-back games. I know when Brady was in New England and we were running through everybody roughshod, there was occasionally a year here or a year there where we'd lose back-to-back games. I think this could be it. And if there's any other person that could do it, it would be Justin Herbert. Now, I'm a little concerned with some of the picks he threw last week in the Dallas Cowboys game, and he's really got to clean that up. But I would not be shocked one bit with that defensive line and Joey Bosa getting after Patrick Mahomes and Derwin James and those safeties playing cover 2 and just making the Kansas City Chiefs drive the length of the field, which they hate doing. They love going for that big play, and they get impatient. I think Derwin James could be in for an interception or 2, and I would not be one bit shocked if the Chargers won that game.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then the final segment that is sweeping the nation, Fantasy Bullets with Burg. Sir, what are your hot start sits, I guess? Is that the best way of putting it for you?
So I'm actually gonna go with my hot ad for the week in this segment here. The big guy that I'm targeting in my leagues, who has been out there on the waiver wire, KJ Osborne. He's a receiver from Minnesota, and through 2 weeks he's been a very productive PPR receiver for the Vikings. Week 1 he came out with 7 receptions for 76 yards. That's a 14.6 point day for him. And then last week, 5 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown, which is very impressive that he's taken such a big part of this Vikings offense, given the presence of Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen there. If he's out there in your waiver wires, pick him up. I'm going to be targeting him in all my leagues, hoping to snag him up. You want to start talking start and sit. Excuse me. For me, a big one that you may have been worried about going into the season here. A little bit because he's coming off injury. Courtland Sutton, he exploded this week for the Denver Broncos. I've been benching him in the leagues that I own him in, but I think he exploded for like 150 yards maybe. He's a guy that especially with Jerry Jeudy being out, definitely a target to start in your leagues now. If he's on your, I'm assuming he's not in your waiver wire, but if you do have him, you're unsure about him. I think he showed a lot, this week, against obviously the lowly Jaguars, but he's playing the lowly New York Jets next week. So I think he is an absolute start if you have him on your roster.
Yeah. Now listen, I am 0-2 so far, and I'm hating life. I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, this is why I hate fantasy football. But let me ask you, what's your thoughts on Chase Claypool? Because so far he's had 2 pretty bad games. 7 points week 1, 6.7 for week 2. I mean, what's happening there, man?
I mean, in Pittsburgh, if you're in a PPR league, the guy to own in that receiving core for Pittsburgh is Deonte Johnson. I don't think he's had a drop yet through 2 weeks, if I'm remembering correctly. He's the guy there that's gonna get you the PPR points. Chase Claypool is a little bit more of a big play guy where he's gonna haul in a long touchdown or make a play after a catch where he's gonna get the pay dirt. Obviously the injury to Big Ben is very concerning, for his production, because obviously if they're going to throw out their backup quarterback, I think it's still Mason Rudolph, there in Pittsburgh, it's a little bit worrisome if you're a Chase Claypool owner.
Okay. And maybe this is a question for the both of you guys because it's a Miami-related question. But if I got both Will Fuller and Devontae Parker sitting out there on waivers. Who should I be targeting out of those two guys?
Puma, go ahead.
honestly, like
Nobody
I mean, honestly,
can't get the ball to them.
nobody. I mean, maybe like Devontae Parker, just because he's been there so long, he has been air quote like old faithful, and like who knows what's really going on with Will Fuller? Like, there's reports of like personal issues. He reported back to camp earlier to the team this week, but I mean, there's been like a lot of questions from the beat reporters wondering like if he's actually going to play a full season. So like, I mean, if you're in a dire spot for a wide receiver for the Dolphins, I guess Devontae Parker, but like if you had the chance to like move it on down the line and maybe get like a KJ Hamler or like somebody else from the Broncos, like I would pivot to that before I would start looking at the Dolphins anything.
Yeah, I kind of second what Puma's saying there. I mean, Will Fuller, he's an absolute unknown at this point, so you don't know what he's going to be with this Dolphins team, especially, with a backup quarterback in there. Devontae Parker, gets his targets every week. I think he had 7 in week 1, 9 last week against Buffalo. Parker is definitely the safer add there, but like I said, given the injury to Tua and how the Dolphins seem to be in a little bit of disarray right now, not knowing who's going to play quarterback, and obviously the state of their offensive line, as we've beaten the dead horse on this pod, I would potentially look for another option at that point. Like I said, KJ Osborne, he's been very consistent through 2 weeks. If you can add him, great. Rondale Moore's another one who's probably out there with Arizona. He has been a very, very high spot for them through 2 weeks, and I was an idiot and traded him away over Rashad Bateman with the Baltimore Ravens in my Dynasty League. I toyed with that. Rondale Moore was my guy coming out of the draft that I wanted to hit with a pick, and I probably screwed that one up.
I see him on waivers. Should I pick him up?
Rondale Moore, I would definitely pick him up because I think he's just going to get more involved as the year goes on. I really would pick him up if you can afford a like I said, he's been impressive through 2 weeks, but you know how many weapons that Arizona team has, so you may want to wait another week before you actually play him, just to ensure that he's going to be a focal point in that offense. I know they really like him down there in Arizona, but I mean, he's been very impressive through 2 weeks in terms of being involved. Obviously, last week he went for 114 yards. So I would definitely add him to your roster if you have an ability to do it.
I'm gonna put a waiver in for him. I'm gonna drop Laviska Shenault because I haven't seen anything out of that Jacksonville.
They've been very disappointing. Very disappointing through the in terms of fantasy through the first 2 weeks. Obviously with Urban Meyer down there. DJ Shark, I mean, he had 1 reception for 19 yards last week. He's supposed to be the number 1 down there. Everybody was pretty high on him coming into this season in terms of being a number 1 receiver. He had a pretty good year in 2019. He was pretty good last year. He was out for a few games, but yeah, I would definitely make that move.
I think this is the week I'm gonna win because not because of like my mainstays like Calvin Ridley or Christian McCaffrey, but it's because my defense, the Denver Broncos, is playing the New York Jets, so that's like a guaranteed 2 interceptions right there.
Absolutely, and just a tip point here. This is how I run kind of my fantasy years in regular redraft leagues. Play your defense on matchups every week. Like don't have to stick with your defense through the year. If you see a favorable matchup on free agency or waivers, I would jump on that. Like, you don't have to ride your defense the whole year. It's why I like to wait until like the very end of the draft to select my defense because I know I'm gonna just play matchups all year.
Ooh, I might just pick up that Vegas Raiders defense against the Miami Dolphins. That's a guaranteed.
I'm about to drop the Washington football team defense for them. So
yikes. No, it's a great philosophy to go with, and it's worked for me in the past. I mean, I went 6-0 this week in my 6 leagues with my victories, so not to toot my own horn, but
congratulations!
It worked out good.
We
Thank
are
you, Deonte
so
Adams.
Happy for you.
You should finally give me some praise. It's about time.
Don't be mocking the fantasy expert, okay? He's on the pod for this shit, so I don't want to hear no goddamn things. Now, Now, Birch, I need you as a Kyle Pitts, manager.
Yeah.
I need you. I need you to put some wind in the sails. Like, are there brighter days ahead for Kyle Pitts? I mean, it looked like there was some bright spots against Tampa Bay, but like they're going against the Giants. Like their schedule coming up, it's not like a murderer's row. Like, would you like dump Kyle Pitts? Like, would you try to package him in a trade? Would you hold him? Like, what are you thinking if you have Kyle Pitts on your roster right now?
I definitely don't dump him because at some point he's going to break out, I think. I really believe that. I mean, they only have Calvin Ridley in that offense. Obviously, Russell Gage got dinged up in that game against the Buccaneers this week. Atlanta as a whole has been very disappointing through 2 weeks with their fantasy production. Calvin Ridley, I made a trade for him, a pretty big trade for him in the offseason, and it hasn't exactly paid dividends yet. I mean, he did have the touchdown last week, but I mean, I gave up Deebo Samuel and David Montgomery to get him because I was looking for that stud receiver going forward here, and it hasn't exactly amounted to that yet. Your best bet is either to bench him, keep a bench spot open for him, and keep him until he breaks out, because I really do believe at some point this year he's going to have a monster game. I mean, you saw it against Tampa Bay this week where he had some flashes in that game, in terms of that one of those catches he made in that game was unbelievable, where he kind of reached back for it through coverage, caught it, and ended up getting some yards after the catch there. I would not outright cut him. If you can package him in a trade.
No. It's either like trade or bench. Like, I'm not cutting that kid.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you can kind of capitalize on his name, it's still early, so in the event that he doesn't break out, and you can get yourself another stud tight end, I mean, I would target, obviously, you're going to pay more now because he had a big game, but TJ Hawkinson would be a great guy to go after going forward. But in the event you can't find a suitable trade, because you don't want to really sell low on him at this point, it's still too early to sell low. I would just bench him and try to fill the position in other ways, whether it be through the waiver wire or through a trade where you're going to keep him on your roster.
Yeah, and Puma, just to give you some advice, I mean, I saw week 1 how Atlanta was using him, and he was nowhere to be found, and that kind of concerned me. So I saw Gronkowski was out there, so I put a claim in for him, because Gronk's playing 81% of the snaps, and they're using him heavily, and Brady's looking for him quite often in the red zone. So I didn't get rid of Pitts immediately. I dropped him down on the bench, and I picked up Gronk, and I'm just kind of waiting it out to see exactly what Pitts is going to do. In the grand scheme of things, if everything pans out the way I want it to pan out, and Pitts comes along and Gronk is playing well, I'm going to start both Gronk and Kyle Pitts and see how that goes.
I mean, that's what I'm doing right now, because I have Darren Waller as my tight end, so I got Waller and Pitts, so I'm all set there. Like, if I'm in a dire need of a position, I might look to ship Pitts off, but it's just disconcerting knowing that you're the highest drafted tight end in NFL history, and you haven't even found pay dirt yet.
A lot of it comes down to Matt Ryan, and if I'm Arthur Blank, I'm gonna have to make a decision on him here fairly soon, man. Because with Matt Ryan, it was always he can't win, but the dude consistently put up really good numbers and looked sharp. But I mean, those 2 pick sixes he threw and how shaky he looked in week 1. If I'm Arthur Blank, I'm definitely reconsidering a couple of different things at my quarterback position.
I mean, I second that 100%. In terms of fantasy, you could always count on Matt Ryan to be kind of that waiver level guy that you could pick up and plug in for a bye week or an injury or what have you. He has not looked like that through 2 weeks, despite having a 69% completion percentage, but only 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. That's not ideal for a guy. If you have him on your fantasy team, you're definitely not starting him at this point. But yeah, Pitts. When you're looking at these receivers from a fantasy perspective, you do like Jay said with the snap count with Gronk. You want to look at that. You want to look at the amount of targets he's getting in the offense, whether or not he's catching it or not. You want to look at the targets that he's getting in the offense, because at the end of the day, those targets are eventually going to turn into receptions, which are points in a PPR league. So that's why I'm kind of at the point now looking at Kyle Pitts' targets and receptions, like I'm not ready to just. You definitely don't cut bait with him at this point. It's just if you can trade him, and you can try to trade him for top value or mid-range value to improve another position in your roster, great. But in your situation, Puma, where you have Darren Waller, there's no point to trade him. You just bench him and ride it out.
Sick.
So.
All right. Is that it for the fantasy segment?
That's all I got.